It's my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today. I met Dr. Guttenberg probably around 4.5 years ago when I came to UB as the new dean. I have known Dr. Guttenberg before that. I have read his publications, I have seen some of his presentation. It was a great honor for me to meet him. He is here today to give you a message. He may not tell you everything about himself, but he's an individual that graduated from UB in 1969, became an oral surgeon, and I don't have to go through his 27 pages long CV, but let me just tell you two things. I won't tell you how old you are, but he still goes to his office. He's there 6 o'clock in the morning, leaves 6 o'clock at night, 5 days a week. And that's a tremendous accomplishment, but it's accomplishments based on what we gave him here at the University of Buffalo. Furthermore, last year, he bequested to our dental school the largest bequest we ever received, $4 million. So with that, Dr. Guttenberg, thank you very much. The podium is yours.
Thank you. Here we go. Good. UB Council Member O'Brien, Provost Zukowski, Dean Glickman, exalted faculty, friends and family, and you, the new graduates to our profession. It's an honor to be here. It's hard for me to believe that I am. It's 1969, I was sitting just where you are in our graduation. At that time, we didn't have separate award nights, and I was wondering whether I'd win the Snow Prize, and in fact, I did wind up winning the Snow Prize. One of the highlights of my career at that time. I have a little quiz for you. Perhaps you've seen The Wolf of Wall Street. If you haven't, it's an interesting movie. And on the right-hand side of that screen, you see the University of Maryland School of Dentistry, also known as the Baltimore College of Dentistry, the first dental school in the United States. And you're probably out there thinking, what is he showing us this for? Because there's a connection. The person that was played as the main character in The Wolf of Wall Street was this fellow here, Jason Belfort. And Jason Belfort was a kind of a greedy guy, and that's what the whole movie was about. And he defrauded a lot of people out of a lot of money. And I did some research on Jordan Belfort that I thought I'd want to share with you because it kind of shows what type of person he is and what type of person you folks out here are not. Now, there is one bad word in this interview. And this interview was on television in California, and I got it off the internet, like where we get everything, right? So if you want to hear the one bad word, plug your ears up, and just when the video stops, you won't hear it.
Ultimately, I put myself through college with the money I made on the beach, and then spent 1 day in dental school.
Yeah,
and the reason I went to dental school is because my mother had inserted a belief in my head, great woman, that, you know, the only noble way to make money is you got to be a doctor. You got to be a doctor. Well, I didn't want to be a doctor because that would have taken 10 years, but I figured dentistry would be pretty good. I'd make a lot of money and be a pillar of the community. So I went to dental school, and the first day I walked in, I'll never forget this, there was 105 kids sitting in the dental auditorium, and the dean's in the front, and this gray-haired guy, and he says, I want to welcome you all to the Baltimore College of Dental Surgery. You should be very proud to come this far. You're going to really do great things with your life being a dentist. Well, it sounded pretty good. Then he says, let me say this. The golden age of dentistry is over. If you're here to make a lot of money, you're probably in the wrong place. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm in the wrong place. I stood up and I walked away. I dropped out of dental school on my first day. All right?
So if you haven't seen the movie, when you go, you'll look at him in a whole new light. So one thing I'd want to say if I got to meet Mr. Belfort would be, hey, dentists are doctors. He should know that. You all know that. You're oral physicians. the way it should be. You're members, important members of the medical community. And the other thing I'd want to tell him was, you know, you should have listened to your mama. You would have wound up in jail. Well, you know, he also didn't get to read this. If you haven't seen U.S. News and World Report, the 2014 issue, where they put out every year the best professions in the United States, what comes out on top in health professions? Dentistry. Ranked in healthcare jobs, #1. No better job in dentistry. Last year we were #1 overall, but this year we dropped down to #3. Still a pretty good showing. 3rd best job in the United States. You guys are in our profession. You're in the right place. Now, he speaks in that video about money. He's very focused on money. I can tell you, if you want to make money in our profession, you can. A number of my colleagues bring home 7-figure incomes. That's for, you know, if you haven't figured that out, at this point it's over $1 million. It's a lot of money. And that's what their take-home is. They work hard and they do what they love what they do, and they bring home the money. I also have a colleague, graduated from the Medical College of Virginia, Tim Bartholomew, seen here in this image with his wife and his child. Tim loves oral surgery. He loves dentistry. He decided to go to Africa and ramble around Africa in different places, providing oral and maxillofacial surgery to different people for no money. He had subsistence from a church group, put some food on his table, some clothes on his back, and not a whole lot. And he depends on people like me and others to supply him with instruments, a few bucks here and there to do some extra things. But he's not living high on the hog, but he's doing what he loves, and he loves what he does. Here's a picture of Tim and Nguyen, and they're not studying by candlelight for romantic purposes. It's because the lights go out about once every 3 nights in the countries that he's usually in. And here he is in the clinic, in the countries that he goes to, volunteering his services, teaching the locals about oral and maxillofacial care. And every once in a while, I get a note or a letter from Tim, and he says, gee, I got this patient with this thing growing on their nose, like this, or a bad cleft case. The things you see in the pathology books, they're never going to see here in real life. And he's treating those things for 0 compensation. It's the heart of what we do. It's what I think is important. I'm a lucky guy. I'm really lucky. This is where I grew up. This is where I spent my formative younger years. This is a new picture that I got off of Google. We didn't have fire escapes back then, so it's a good thing we didn't have any major fires. We didn't have these nice windows they were put in, and we certainly did not have air conditioning. And we didn't have an elevator, which is a good thing, so it allowed us to build up our legs as we went up to the 4th floor. But what was really good was that, this is my father here, he was a dental laboratory technician. His lab was right around the corner. And so in between playing on the playground and things, I would go to his lab. I learned how to mix plaster. I learned how to mix stone. When things got a little bit later on, he taught me how to do wax-ups. I learned how to do casting. So there was no question which direction I was going to go in when I grew up. I was going to become a dentist. And I just, from the day I got to school, I said I was going to become a dentist. And so I was lucky enough, when I was looking for schools throughout the country, I spoke to a lot of the dental practitioners that sent my father Crowder Bridge work to do. And I kept hearing University of Buffalo. It was the University of Buffalo back then, had a great dental school. And I said to myself, well, I'm going to go to Buffalo undergraduate so I can get into their dental school and improve my chances. And that's what I did. So in 1961, my dad and I got in the car, and we went from Passaic, New Jersey, here to Buffalo. And then we moved in the next day to what you call Kimball Hall now, across from Squire. That was our dormitory, Tower Dormitory. And that's where I lived for a couple of years. I spent the entire 60s here in Buffalo. And I got to tell you about the 60s. The 60s were amazing. So amazing that I just saw, as I was watching the tube before I came over here, was that CNN is doing a series on the 60s. They call it the decade that changed everything. It changed the world. And it is. I want to share some of the highlights of that decade with you because I think it's mundane to why you're sitting there and for your futures as well. Well, you know, I got here and my mind was totally set on being a dentist. And the first day I moved into Tower Dorm, there's a letter in my post box in the basement level of Tower Dorm. It's from the University of Buffalo School of Dentistry. I said, wow, I just got here and they're accepting me, you know. I always see the glass more than half full. But no, it was a letter saying, and see, I had the word fluoride up there because you all take fluoride for granted. Everybody uses fluoride, their toothpaste, etc. Back then, this was under experimental. So I was being invited to go to the dental school if I want to take part in the study to see the results of non-fluoridated versus fluoridated toothpaste. They would give me all the toothpaste I needed. They would give me toothbrushes, dental exams. I said, wow, I am in seventh heaven. And fluoride became one of the most significant drugs that I think that was developed for us dentists in the 60s and perhaps up to this particular time. Other things happened in the 60s that affected the entire world. Drugs. And I'm not talking about penicillin and codeine. We're talking about, up until the 60s, marijuana was a verboten word, the killer weed. People in nice society didn't smoke marijuana. I mean, I don't now. I did inhale. I didn't like it. Put it down. But there became the era of hallucinogens, LSD. It made it a profound effect because now you see marijuana is accepted in numerous states, either at a social or medical level. The 60s, an era of change. The other thing, and probably the most major drug exploration and finding in the 60s were birth control pills. You're going, birth control pills. You take it for granted now. But you see, up into the 60s, mid-60s, women were not really in the mainstream. Women were kind of like second-hand citizens. There weren't any women's sports teams in college. Women were not in control of their own bodies. It was the birth control pill which led people to be in control of their reproductive rights, but also it gave women the understanding that there was more to be done. And that led to the women's movement, women's liberation movement, which has changed everything. There weren't women governors back then. There weren't women educators and deans. It was because of that pill that led to liberation that allowed these things to happen. So a very important finding in the 60s. The 60s, the decade that changed everything. If you don't think it's important in terms of your own personal lives, let me show you a picture of Joyce Yao. She was a member of my graduating class in 1969. She was the only woman in 1969 in our dental school. And look at the change now as I look out here. I'm calculating, yep, there's about 54% of you in the graduating class that are women. Those are the strides that I think are important. In the 1960s, we also had a huge civil rights movement. It was incredible what we went through in trying to raise up African Americans and having them take their proper place in our society. Here you see behind me a great picture of a march, typical marches with blacks and whites holding arms and protesting against the inferior treatment that blacks were getting at the time. In terms of housing, education, jobs, you name it, it was terrible. We certainly have made some strides today. I wish I could show you a picture of the black person in my class, but I can't. We didn't have one in 1969. I'm happy to say that there have been some improvement, but perhaps not yet enough. There's 5%, I know, of your class that are minorities. That's great. We need to do more. You think that civil rights is where we want to be, but you can see the events of the last couple of weeks have shown us that we're really not really as far along as we ought to be in terms of racism in America, something that each and every one of us can work on. And the 60s gave us Vietnam. Up until then, we had World War I, World War II, the Korean War, all these other wars that people were proud to put on a uniform and go fight for the United States, that the United States was in the right. Vietnam was very different. It was a war that really created great division here in the United States. We had protest groups all over. This was a picture in Washington, get out of Vietnam. On the other hand, of course, you wanted to support the young men and women who were over there fighting and unfortunately losing their lives. It was a time that changed the way Americans looked at their government and accepted or didn't accept what they were putting forth on our plate. And we were not immune here in Buffalo. I was here during those whole 60s. And let me tell you, it was frequently referred to as the Berkeley of the East. Why? Because of the incredible amount of protest that we saw here. This was a picture that I got out of the UB Today magazine. That smoke was not from Sunday afternoon barbecue. That was tear gas that was here on campus by government troops firing tear gas to put down the events that were occurring here. The 60s, the time that changed our whole world. Let me read this quote from that article. A cultural revolution was brewing, and college campuses were incubators for social protest. A national student movement emerging from 64 to 69, just when I was in dental school here, responds to the Vietnam War, civil rights, and other issues. Buffalo was and has been and continues to be forward-thinking. It expanded our minds, and I hope you take these lessons to expand yours as well. And then, of course, the 60s, we had music. We had great music that culminated perhaps in the Woodstock Festival. And I'm just going to flash up part of the list of singing groups that existed then that you still know now. You know these names. They were speaking about life and love and the war. You could actually understand what they were saying. They didn't use a whole lot of bad words. But take a look at these groups. I mean, this is what the 60s were. It was an evolution, a time of change. No decade, I think, has been quite as important. And also in the 60s, we came face to face with death of national figures that we weren't familiar with had happening. I can still remember where I was on the UB campus when I got word that President Kennedy had been shot. I remember when MLK, Martin Luther King, was assassinated. We couldn't believe it. And then finally, the big triumvirate, if you will, when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. And I saw Bobby Kennedy. I met him. And where did I meet him? I met him on the steps of Norton Union. You don't know what Norton Union is because it was reconfigured, and it's now called Squire Hall, the School of Dentistry. And by coincidence, I became very close with the family later on in Washington, D.C., and actually have been privileged to look after a number of his family members. And then on February 24th, 1968, while I was a junior, and I know you probably have read about this story, but one of our beloved classmates, Tom Kozlowski, was severely injured fatally in a snowmobile accident on that day. And we were very sad. In fact, nearly the entire class went down to Utica, New York 4 days later for his wake and funeral on February 28th. And the entire class came back that night, except for one person. And that one person was in a car crash on the way back to school. And that person fractured his arms, his legs, his back, and his jaw. And spent a month at the St. Luke's Hospital in Utica, New York. I was that student. And during that time, I learned a lot about people. Here I was in Utica, New York, didn't know a soul. And every day, people from the community would come and visit me. They didn't know me, I didn't know them, but they heard I was in a car crash. One of the surgeons looking after me was a UB graduate. He came every day and we chatted, it was nice. I was kind of messed up at the beginning, so I had clergymen, I had a minister, a priest, and a rabbi, and this is not a joke. But every day at the beginning, they all came and they said prayers over me. So I just kept my mouth shut. I was enjoying this all. So when they found out my religion, I said, hey, keep on coming. This is great. I really love it. What also happened there, which endeared me to this university, was another name that you've seen, because I think you have a clinic named after him, Richard Powell. Richard Powell was assistant dean. He was an ex-Marine. He was a really strict disciplinarian. He was hard-nosed. There's some other words I could use, but not in polite company. He was a tough guy. But when he heard I was in an accident, by February 28th, I was a reasonably good student. But at that time, I'd actually finished all my requirements my junior year, except putting in the time. And so he had my classmates write up their notes every day, bring them down to the office. He made Xerox copies and got them all for me because I'm not sure how many courses you take now, but we were on the trimester system, and we had 13 final examinations when I got back out of the hospital a month later. And I was able to take them because of Dean Powell. So that put him in a special place in my heart, and the school as well. 1969, yeah, that's me. I was class vice president, sitting up here, and with the fellow who's my class president, someone that you're probably familiar with, Jerry Wiskowski, who's recently retired, I guess. And so we graduated, and what did we do after that? Well, a small group went on to dental graduate schools. A small group stayed at the university, like Dr. Wiskowski did, and stayed on as an instructor. And then the rest of us, which was the vast rest of us, went into the military. Because we were given a choice during the Vietnam years. It was, here's your choice. You can either be drafted, and we might pick your name out of a hat, and you will go to Vietnam as a grunt, a ground soldier. And you didn't want to do that. They said, or you can join this pre-enlisted program, and you can go in as a captain, an officer. So it didn't take a lot of thinking. Virtually all of us that didn't go on to school went to the military. And what was really good about that was that it became our graduate dental program, if you will. But we got a chance to see many of the other dentists from around the country. I think we had about 100 dentists and 4 docs. And then you could sit back and say, wow, we got a great education at UB, superior to any other school. I had heard about, Georgetown and Pennsylvania and these schools out west, and I thought I was going to be intimidated by their knowledge. Don't be so. You get a great education here that's superior to anything that I know, and still keeps Buffalo in the top of the heap in dental schools in the United States. So the 60s are about change, and I want to point out to you that change is not easy. I'm not saying that it's something that you need to do, but it's the thing is that change is difficult. But if you don't change what you've already learned, you're going to fall behind. Right now, you're at the peak of your knowledge. You've gotten all this great education. Next week, there's going to be a new dental material out that you don't know about that's probably better than the one you're using now. Don't get stuck in the past. Be willing to change. A number of dentists don't do that. So, but the time 10 years goes by, they're so far gone they don't even realize it. You're not going to do that because I know that Dean Glickman really professes that you don't. Let me tell you something else about change. There's a little song that I think you'll enjoy. This guy changed his name. You know Robert Zimmerman? Nobody knows Robert Zimmerman. But you probably heard about this guy, Bob Dylan. The times they're changing. They were changing in 1964. That song still persists today. And why? Because the times are always changing. You have to be fluid. We're in a fluid profession. Keep that in mind, please. Pierre Fauchard. You've probably heard his name, right? Dental school. He was not a dentist. He's the father of dentistry, but he was a physician. And why is he called the father of dentistry? Because Pierre Fauchard couldn't put up with the way that dentists were treating people back then. They saw a tooth with decay. They didn't try to restore it or fix it. They took it out. Pierre Fauchard said, that is just incredibly wrong. So what Pierre Fauchard did, he made his own dental drill. That is one of the first dental drills Pierre Fauchard made. He made a whole bunch of instruments. He did the first orthodontic movement. He's a physician, just as we are physicians of the mouth. He saw missing teeth. He carved new ones out of bone and shells, and he bound them together with metal fasteners, tied some gold string to it, and attached them to teeth. I mean, he was a forward thinker, outside the box. That's what I hope that each one of you will be. And I know you're a really brilliant class, because out of every 22.33 individuals who applied to UB Dental School, you are the only ones that are sitting in that seat right now. I know that your incoming average was 3.65, so I know that you're really smart people. And you'll continue to be smart under the tutelage of the learned professors that are behind me. Did you know, though, that the average cost to educate each one of you is $130,000? Every year, $130,000 for each one of you. Now, you think being a state university, that the rest would be picked up here in addition to your tuition, which is not small, but doesn't come close to covering the cost. But the state university only picks up 17%. Where does the rest of that money come from? The rest of that money comes from corporations, from industry, from friends of the university, and from people like you're going to be in a few minutes, alumni. And I don't think the school expects you to next year go out and take out a bunch of money and put it in, but you're going to do very well. Keep the school in mind when time comes. And I see the deans behind me saying, Guttenberg, it's time to zip it, right? And he's right, and I'm nearly finished. A few points. Love what you do what you love. I mean, as the dean told you, I get up very early. I'm 70 years old. He wouldn't tell you my age. I'm 70 years old. I love what I do, and I do what I love. I'm up at 4:30 every morning, 5 days a week. I'm in my office or in the hospital no later than 6 a.m. I love it. I'm usually there till about 6 or 7, or when my wife calls me and says, honey, you didn't sleep there tonight? Oh, no, I got to come home. Because I think that, don't forget about your family, but it's really, we have a great profession. Embrace that change that I'm talking about. Don't run away from change. Do it. You've been taught things, and a lot of the things that you've done is to actually think inside the box and answer the questions the way they want to hear the answers for them. It's now time to take that knowledge and education and synthesize your new thoughts. Think out of the box. That's the way things get accomplished. Do the right thing. I see a lot of people in our profession, not a lot, a few people in our profession that do the wrong thing for the wrong purposes. Keep your ethics and morals high. It will pay off in the end. I mean, I can't tell you that I really always try to do the right thing, and it works out. I've made out very well professionally in many ways. Help those in need. I mean, I think there's a bigger part of your education now in terms of dealing with neighborhood clinics. I still do that. I take care of people at the hospital. I don't get paid for that. I do it because they need the care, and I have the ability to take care of them. And the money isn't important. You'll get benefits in other ways. And when you finally pay off your debt, don't forget about the school, because the school, this is the place that you've been birthed. This is the place that you've grown inside the womb of UB, and you've been birthed now. And don't forget to give back. You know, this is the current motto of the school: to learn, to search, to serve. I guess it's okay. It's a kind of a new motto that they only came out a few years ago. Up here is the motto that I lived with, that caught my eye back in 1961. Let each become all he is capable of being. I saw that motto and I embraced it. I said, wow, this is meaningful. This means something. I could tell you something. When I get in a room, I'm not the smartest guy, but I bet you I'm probably the hardest working guy. And that's why I've done well for all this time, because I believe in this saying, to be as good as I can possibly be. And I think that that's a good motto to take forward in life. And let me tell you, the next to last slide here is that, this is a picture of me also. After a tough day in the clinic, I'm sure none of you have ever had those days, right? Where the crown flew out and flew underneath the locker and you can't find it. I can tell that's never happened to you all. Well, let me tell you something. That mistakes are made. I know that you can see probably the big writing there. It says, do it tomorrow. What you can't see is the writing down here. And what that says, you've made enough mistakes today. And let me tell you, we all make mistakes. There's not one of us that's perfect. We all make mistakes. The key is learn from that mistake or those mistakes. Get your butt up and be proud, walk forward, and get over it. You'll do better tomorrow, and that's true. And I do want to finish with this one saying, because I think it's kind of appropriate for today and for the future as well, by Alice Morse Earle. The clock is running. Make the most of today. Time waits for no man or woman. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. Today's a gift. This is your gift, your graduation. Tomorrow you don't know what's going to happen. Learn from what happened yesterday. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you Godspeed as you progress through our profession. My best wishes. Thank you very much for letting me speak.